there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. I have another fun technique today to use our stencils in a slightly different way to get a slightly different look. And I'm going to be using these two stencils today just to give you a couple of examples. The first one there on the right is the Simple Stories Lattice stencil, and then the one on the left, I don't think I can remember where I got that from, but anyway, Rows of Love Hearts. And the idea is that you are able to use the stencils that you have in your collection and mask off portions of them so that we can give them a slightly different look. So first of all, I'm going to start off with the first one here, and I'm not going to lie, spoiler alert, the second one is my favorite. But we are going to do this first one because it's a really simple and easy pattern and a great example of how we can just change it up a little bit rather than just popping ink straight through the stencil or popping like embossing paste or anything like that straight through the stencil. So first of all, I did decide at this point that I wanted to give my card front piece of paper a little bit of colour. So I am using some Distress Oxide. This is the Tumbled glass. It's just a light blue colour. This is just plain normal cardstock, so I am not going for a perfect blend. Honestly, you will barely see this colour at the end, but it does fill in the gaps rather than them being stark white, which was my goal with this. So I'm not going for a perfect blend. If I wanted to get a really, really smooth blend here, then I would have used the Tim Holtz watercolor paper, and that would have enabled me to get a really nice smooth blend. But this is just my regular paper, and I have a domed foam blender on there. This kind of reminds me of a sky. It's got a little bit of uneven kind of inking, and I quite like that. So then this is the point where we're going to put the stencil down. And it's kind of here that you can decide which part you want to kind of mask. So I'm going to be using some Gina K masking magic paper. This is my favorite masking paper. It is worth every penny. This is something that I invest in to make my crafting less frustrating for me. And this one is definitely great value. So I'm just going to take a pencil, and I have popped that little piece of masking paper underneath, and I'm just going to trace through some of the stencils, in fact a whole line across, and that will mean that I can get a whole image and do some cutting to create a mask that is going to help us use multiple colors on this stencil. So once I have gone right along, you can kind of, I know it's a little bit hard to see because I have used pencil, but you can see that I have just kind of traced the diamonds, and then I am just going to cut with my little cutter bees. These are fussy cutting scissors. I'm going to cut the exact kind of pattern, just follow that, just going slightly down, because remember what we traced is actually inside of the stencil. So I want this mask to kind of cover the actual diamond pattern. So I'm just going ever so slightly down, remembering that I don't want to cut all the way, because that way I can kind of use both sides of this little mask that we have created. Whereas if I kind of cut down through the bottom, that would mean that half would be a little bit ruined, but we could probably still use it, but it's easier if you just kind of go straight across. Then I'm taking some mint tape. This is just a really nice low tack tape that is going to hold my stencil in place, because I'm going to be doing quite a lot of shifting around. So I've got a couple of bits here that I pop down on the back of my card front. And then that way my stencil's in place, and this is where we can start popping the masks down. I'm choosing to use some chipped Sapphire and Salty Ocean. I'm going to keep this first card really kind of simple just to show you the technique, and then after this we're going to step it up a little bit too. So I have taken off the backing paper, and to start with I'm going to go right at the very bottom because that keeps it nice and simple, and this is going to cover the stencil but not the little parts that we want to go through. So I'm just going to use finger daubers for this because the lattice pattern is actually quite delicate in the stencil. It's quite small. It's not a really, really large. It's not extra small, but it's not large. So a normal like domed foam blender would probably be a little bit big for this technique, so finger daubers are perfect. And with my finger daubers for the oxides, I generally have like either a light and a dark, or if it's a color I use a lot of, I have a light, medium and a dark finger dauber for each of the color families. So those 2 or 3 finger daubers might actually do 5 or 6 colors. And then, so here's the next part. When I have shifted up the top mask, I'm taking the bottom mask that we created as well, and then I'm going to mask off one more layer. Now I'm actually skipping a row of the diamonds, so to speak, and that's where I'm going to pop the other color in. You could go for gold here, you could do the full rainbow, you could also do it vertical. I chose to go horizontal across the pattern, but just so I could kind of show you that you can, rather than if you were ink blending where you could kind of, it would be tricky with this pattern, the way that the diamonds kind of fall into each other, to separate the two colors. You could get a really nice blend, of course, but for this one I didn't want to blend. I wanted two really individual colors, so that's when it's handy to be able to mask off your stencils, and it changes the look just a little bit from what you could otherwise get. So this is just a really quick way. It doesn't take long to create the masks, and of course you can reuse them time and time again. I chose to start with the lighter color so that I don't get too much ink transfer onto my finger daubers when I go back and add the darker color, but either way around is going to work. This is the good thing about the Gina masking paper, is that this can hold up to a lot of ink. A lot of ink, and that is what is most important when I am ink blending or masking something off. I don't want anything to bleed through or soak through. That is the most frustrating experience, when you think you've masked it off and then you lift it up expecting this beautiful clean peel and result, and there's actually little splotches underneath, or there's wispy bits that have kind of wicked underneath. It is the most frustrating experience for me. So for me, this is worth investing into a really good masking paper, and this is the one that I found works well. So there you go. You can see I managed to do the two completely separate colors, and then once I peel off the stencil, this leaves a really clean result. The masking did its job, and this is a fun background which we can turn into a card. But just to kind of change it up, same, but changing it just a little bit to show you another option, I am going to do the hearts this time around. I have, again, a little piece of masking paper underneath there. I save all my little pieces of masking paper because I feel like no matter which project I take on, there is going to be the perfect size piece for it. So I already had these pieces, they had been popped back in the packet, and they are just the perfect kind of size. They give me enough space that I know I won't get ink anywhere else, but I know that I'm not wasting much either. So I have gone over two of the rows of hearts, and again, I know it's tricky to see, but I'm just going to go right in between those two wee lines that I did and cut with my little cutter bee scissors, and then this way I have a top and a bottom mask ready to go. So in my head, I kind of thought I would do one thing with this technique. I thought I kind of figured out the colors that I wanted to use, but then when I started, I definitely kind of had a new plan, and I'm really glad that I went with it because this is my favorite card. So I'm going to pop this stencil down on an angle. I chose not to do any coloring behind the stencil at all. It can be white, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. And then I'm trying to figure out here, if it doesn't fit up the top, it's probably the bottom stencil. So once you peeled off the release paper, as I said, the good thing about this is that the masking paper is that it can hold up to so much ink. So don't throw away your release paper. You can pop it back on and store it with the stencil for next time. They hold up to a whole lot of different ink, and there is no ink transfer when you're kind of going between all different sorts of colors. I mean, obviously you have to be a little bit careful, and you might want to wipe it off in between colors, but it really does hold up to very little ink transfer. So once I've got the top and the bottom down, I'm starting kind of in the middle. I don't really know why I did that, but I have used squeezed lemonade to begin with. You don't have to use inks for this process. I mean, you could use watercolors, you could use some alcohol markers, you could use, anything. You can, play around with what you have and what you're comfortable using. I just liked the ink blending today. I am not doing any fancy ink blending. I am just getting the colors down on there. There's no ombre, there's no light to dark, there's no nothing. I'm just using a finger dauber to pop the ink down. I'm moving on to some Twisted Citron. It's going to be my next color down. As per usual with these videos, I will try and link any of the products that I've used in today's video down in the description box below here on YouTube. And sometimes I'm using things that are not available anymore, but honestly, the idea of these videos is to give you inspiration for your own stash, to see what you could use and what you have available and how you could kind of use it in all sorts of different ways. So I hope that this has inspired you and given you some new ideas. After the Twisted Citron, I did some Cracked Pistachio. Then I'm going to move on to some Tumbled Glass. And you can see even between the yellow and then moving into the blues, I Usually if you had like some ink transfer, you would kind of tinge it a little bit green, but I didn't get any transfer. That blue is absolutely pure blue. It's gorgeous. And here at the top, now that the masking paper has that kind of greeny color on it, I'm going into orange, which would usually make mud, and I still get no ink transfer. So that's really important for me. Another thing that I love about this paper. Now moving into the shaded lilac, that's going to be the last color down the very bottom. And then when I take this off, I really love this look. I love that the hearts are completely separate colors rather than blended into one another. It did mean that I didn't have to worry about the colors being beside each other quite so much, but I really love this. And this here, I was just like, okay, I'm really happy with that. So here are the two different options that we created today, just with a little bit of masking of our stencils and a couple of really good outcomes. I really like both of these, but the rainbow one, for whatever reason today, just caught my eye. It was kind of light pastel colors. And so I'm going to choose these Mystic Birds. This is by Stampendous, and these ones are a little bit different. I just got these in recently and have been kind of looking for a project to use them, and I figure while I'm going rainbow, I'm going to go all out on this card with color. This is going to be a bright and cheerful card. So I'm going to move through this kind of quickly. I'm stamping out a couple of the bits and pieces, a branch, some leaves, and one of the birds in some VersaFine Onyx black ink. This is a pigment ink, which is going to stay wet long enough that I can emboss these images. And I'm going to emboss them just because I kind of like that extra little look, that little bit of shine that it gives. I'm just using some clear embossing powder. This is the super fine one. I always buy the super fine because that way it can do the really delicate images as well as the really solid images as well, rather than buying the normal one and then the super fine one. So I'm just going to heat emboss those. As I said, you don't have to do that step, but for me it just means that I will take away the possibility that I can smudge my images at all. Now I'm going to take full inspiration from the colors that they have used on this stamp set, and that's why I'm going bold today. I'm going colorful. So I picked out my TriBlend markers, my alcohol markers. These ones are fabulous. There are 3 colors in each barrel. I'm going to use the Jade Green blend, the Coral blend, and the True Blue blend. So 3 different shades in every barrel means that it takes all of the guessing work out of it for me, all of the work around which colors go together. Have I got 3 shades that are, you know, a light, mid, and a dark? It just means I don't have to think, and that is my kind of style. The black ones are the bullet tips, and then there's also a grey set which are the brush tips. Personally, I prefer the bullet tips because the types of colouring that I do with these pens lend themselves more towards these kind of images and things rather than really big images where I prefer the brush end tip style. So these are what I prefer, but there are 2 different options out there just in case you are interested. And yeah, I'm going kind of a blues and then that little teal and then this kind of apricot coral color. I really like this. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have thought of this on my own. As I said, I took full inspiration from the front of the stamp set, which is always really useful. It's useful to kind of take these little birdies and go all out there with a bit of cool color. So I'm going to just quickly do this coloring. It doesn't take me long, and as I said, it takes me even shorter amount of time when I don't have to think about you know, trying out the colors, making sure they match, testing them all. So that's something that I completely cut out by having these TriBlend markers. As usual, when I'm stamping out birdies, I have always cut off their little toes and feet. I'm not into fussy cutting those. That takes fussy cutting to a whole nother level for me, and that's not what I'm committed to. I'm taking the Paper Rose All Occasions Sentiment Sheet Set, and these have been handy. I know you've been seeing them in a lot of videos, and of course normal stamps are going to work perfectly fine too. The stamp set also comes with a couple of cute little sentiments as well, which you could definitely use, but today I just wanted to use these ones. I'm really enjoying them. They are lasting me a really long time, so I am enjoying that fact about them, and I'm enjoying that there's more than one of each of the popular sentiments. There's multiples, and there are 12 sheets in here. They do them in black with a white ink on them, and then they do them with a white background and black printing on them. And I know that I could just print those off my computer, but honestly it takes me just as much amount of time to kind of organize the sentiments or find them or print them. And for the price point, it has a really low price point for that whole set, so it's worth it to me. But to each his own, and sometimes you like a really customized stamp or a customized sentiment, so you can print those out and that works well too. Just whatever you have in your stash is going to work. It's always, that's the main name of the game for me. We can make things work with what we have. Now I'm going to pop this bird on and this little branch. I'm going to pop the branch down first because that way I can put his little feet on top of the branch. And I could have used dimension here. I did pop up the little hearts panel, the heart stenciled panel. I cut down the sides just a little bit, about 1/4 of an inch off each side, and then I popped that layer up on foam tape. Then I'm just sitting the little birdie here in place, and I'm just drawing some very simple little legs. I just looked on the front of the packaging and basically copied what the stamp was, and then that way I don't have to fussy cut these, and he still has his little legs as well. Then I'm just going to make the little bird flat as well. As I said, I felt like I didn't need a whole lot of dimension on this card, but you could certainly have it. Then I'm going to pop these couple of extra little leaves at the end, and I really like that. I actually wasn't sure if I was going to use them, but I think they just add that extra little bit to the finished image. And then the very, very simple little happy birthday, which is, I like the size of the sentiment because it's not taking over the whole background that we created and the image. I really like this. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this technique on masking off your stencils, and I hope you give it a go. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!